Here's the thing, creating Smash movesets is not easy. It takes a careful touch to adapt each character's abilities in a way that fits in a platform fighter, stands out amongst the entire cast, and enthralls the fans. And we've had a lot of characters pull it off really well. From the fighting game reps carrying over their game's physics and move lists, to building around signature traits like how Peach can float in midair, to personality stuff like Ike's moveset being straightforward and big on fundamentals because he's a very down-to-earth kind of guy. But there are some exceptions, movesets that don't feel up to snuff by current standards, and one character in particular stands out above the others. After all this time, Ganondorf is still tethered to Captain Falcon's moveset and still held back because of it. While working as a Falcon clone was the only reason he got into Melee, a whole lot of fans still feel he's not living up to his reputation, and they're left hoping the next Smash game will find the opportunity to remake his moveset into something more worthy. So what could such a remake look like? Let's give Ganondorf's Smash design a new incarnation that taps into more of his canon abilities and lore, while keeping the good parts of his current concept because it does have its fans, and give him something worthy of the bearer of the Triforce of Power. Ready? Let's do this. We begin with a complicated topic, appearance. Ganondorf's had a few different looks across Smash's history, pulling from Ocarina of Time in Melee, Twilight Princess for a couple games, then Ocarina of Time 3D most recently. He's always been based on one specific game at a time, which narrows his potential somewhat. So let's do something different. Since he has the unique distinction of being one constantly resurrected entity instead of a string of reincarnations or descendants, Four Swords adventures notwithstanding, what if Smash tapped into several of his appearances at once to create a single definitive design? This video uses his Hyrule Warriors render as an example of such a thing, but Smash would come up with an original design. This is just a good reference point. But looks aren't everything. We need to figure out how he'll attack. A not insignificant crowd has decried Ganondorf's current focus on hand-to-hand combat, with some wanting a moveset that uses a sword for more than just his smash attacks, while also decrying every new sword fighter that gets in. I get the idea behind it, but we can do one better, because he's just as associated with a different weapon. His trident. While it's seen more action in his Ganon form, I think it's fair game for our little experiment. And since the only spear attacks Smash has so far are a handful of Byleth moves, it'd even be pretty unique. That said, if you are into Ganondorf's current moveset, don't worry. While the new weapon of choice will change several of his attacks, a handful will stay as they are when it makes sense to. After all, Ganondorf is no stranger to throwing hands when absolutely necessary. As far as alternate palettes go, honestly, this part doesn't need much changing. He's got a pretty appropriate set of alts as is. Nice spread of colors while remaining appropriately dark and imposing. Shout out to the one that turns his skin blue to resemble Ganon in the 2D Zelda games. That said, there's always the option to change or replace something if a better opportunity arises and a palette or two outlives their usefulness. Maybe something based more directly on Demise, maybe one inspired by Calamity Ganon, maybe he could pull colors from his fellow Zelda end bosses, maybe even in something inspired by the Gerudo menswear in Breath of the Wild if the devs felt adventurous. That's his appearance settled. Now how about Ganondorf's stats and attributes? Getting his fighting style right requires careful attention. We want to expand on how he currently plays, using his new weapon as a focal point, while appealing enough to the player base he already has that they'd want to stick around. It's a difficult balance, but I think I know how best to handle it. Ganondorf would still get a lot off big hits and terrifying reads, but instead of relying on them to keep pace, his trident gives him a much more solidified neutral. The weapon's long, disjointed attacks let him actively space around opponents with less risk of trading hits or getting punished outright. Now instead of having to play carefully around his enemies, he can impose his will at close and medium ranges and force them to respond to him. That said, his old bruiser elements make their presence known sometimes, like how he leans more on big hits and a select few combos than anything more complex. For Ganondorf's exact stats, I changed a few points and left some others as they were. For example, his size and weight stayed put because it made sense to leave them alone. Still big and intimidating, still the 5th heaviest fighter in the game, still prone to taking a lot of punishment, but able to endure it. For his mobility stats though, I made a few small but significant changes that should help his movement. Slightly faster run speed should help him approach and chase people he just hit more consistently. Slightly improved airspeed should also help. He's still rather slow in the air, but now he's a bit more capable of maneuvering during jumps and going over enemy attacks in order to punish them. But the biggest thing is a sizable buff to his walk speed. This gives him better means of making small adjustments to his position without having to commit to a dash. While he's still slow, and his recovery isn't great, he's a little more capable now of reorienting his position when in the fray, which should help his footsies even more. His initial dash and fall speed I kept the same. Meanwhile, not a whole lot changed with his offense stats, which is surprising in hindsight. He ain't the bearer of the Triforce of Power for nothing, and it shows with one of the hardest hitting movesets in the game. That said, we can give him some newfound stability to that power. He'll have more variety in his kill moves than before, be able to take stocks off multiple types of callouts, and even have a couple reliable confirms. This ties into his very slightly faster frame data, as a few moves have been sped up to give him options he didn't have before. Helps that several of the moves that stage slow are big disjoints now. Enough data, let's get to the good part. Ganondorf's moveset has a lot of changes to cover. His basic attacks are as good a starting point as any. Ganondorf's jab is mostly similar to his current one, an open palm thrust with the hand that isn't holding the trident. But a few key changes make it better. It comes out one frame faster, creates a burst of dark magic once his hand is fully extended for a bigger hitbox, and most importantly, it has more hit stun and less knockback growth with a more diagonal angle. Yep, it's a combo move at certain percents now, just like Roy's jab, and at high percents it's a kill confirmed too. Ganondorf's forward tilt swaps the Leonidas kick for something more practical, gripping his trident with one hand and stabbing forward. With better range than his old forward tilt, a disjointed hitbox since it's using a weapon and not his body, and the option to angle it up or down, it's worth using in more situations. Sad to say it, I decided to ditch the volcano kick for something that actually helps Ganondorf do more than cheese people. This new up tilt has him swing his trident upward from ground level, sort of a scoop motion that starts in front of him and stops diagonally up and behind him. It might sound weak, but it's surprisingly quick and works as a combo starter at low percents. Ganondorf's down tilt, I left as is. I want him to have some physical attacks still, and it already has surprising reach and power. While his new forward tilt is for spacing, this is for getting knockouts. I also left his dash attack alone, mostly. The full power tackle is already one of the best dash attacks in the game when you account for how much you can do out of the late hit. The one thing I'd mess with is upgrading the visuals so a burst of dark lightning comes out as the hitbox does. Really emphasize that power. But such power pales in comparison to Ganondorf's new smash attacks. All three are different now, and all are a force to be reckoned with. For his forward smash, Ganondorf rears back, grips his trident with both hands, and performs a wickedly powerful stab that reaches far ahead, can be angled up or down, and is terrifyingly strong at the trident's tip. His previous forward smashes ripped off Falcon and Ike respectively, but this time he's stealing from Byleth. Use it to catch landings or read ledge options, and watch people die at hilariously early percents if the tipper hits, and still decently early with the sour spot. Don't worry, Ganondorf's new up smash is original. He quickly slams the hilt of his trident against the ground, generating a small electric shockwave at his feet, then thrusts it upward as it conducts a blast of dark lightning. It's his fastest smash attack now if you count the first part, which launches people into the main hit above. Very good vertical reach, but the main hitbox is a circle above him that's kinda weird to aim. Works best as a platform trap or out of shield punish. But who says he has to use his weapon for everything? Ganondorf's down smash has him gather dark magic into his free hand and punch the ground with enough power to cause a semicircular dark explosion. If it sounds like it kills early, that's because it does. And it has enough range to his left and right to be a scary tech read. But the startup ain't that great, and it's not active for very long, so timing it right would be key. Alright, what about Ganondorf's aerials? We have a lot of changes here. Not his neutral air though, that one I kept the same. Another move that's already really good at what it does, and it helps create relatively quick pressure and finish combos on this moveset too. Ganondorf's forward air though now has him grip his trident partway up and swing it downward in front of him. It's sort of a replacement for his current forward air that makes it less situational, giving it more range and disjoint and better startup that allows for air-to-air combat. Knockback's a step back from the current version, but it still kills at reasonable percents, especially if the tip hits. For his new back air, Ganondorf performs a one-handed stab behind him. Like a cross between his current back air and Byleth's, it trades a slight amount of power and safety on shield for greater range and utility. Compared to Byleth's back air, it comes out faster, sits higher, and has less range. Don't worry, Ganondorf's new up air isn't based on his current one. Instead, he spins his trident horizontally above himself for a full rotation. Deals only one hit, but its range to either side is something else. This newfound juggling tool keeps opponents above him where they're more vulnerable, and eventually it starts to kill. Got a lot of end lag though, so you'd have to be smart about using it. Then Ganondorf's down air, get this, has him grip his trident and throw it downward with so much force that it carries him with it. A dive kick of sorts that moves slightly forward, deals a ton of damage, especially when he impacts the ground and causes an explosion, and the very start of it can even spike. However, it's slow even by Stallenfall standards, relegating it to mix-ups or big reads. Save it for when no one's expecting it though, and look out. Ganondorf's grab game also got some touch-ups, starting with a little help. His grab animations are the same, but now they're 1 frame faster, giving them average startup compared to other weapon users and making his grappling just a little more of a threat. His pummel though? Who needs to knee people when he can just press down harder on his opponent and blast them with dark lightning? This would be one of the strongest pummels in the entire game, though also one of the slowest. Ganondorf also got some new tricks for his throws. His forward throw now has him lob his victim forward and stab them twice with his trident, and it's second only to Mewtwo's forward throw in damage. His back throw is mostly unchanged, but now the kick is accompanied by dark magic and deals slightly more damage. His up throw is also similar, but now the uppercut is even more forceful, comes with a dark blast on hit, and deals so much more knockback that it is now the strongest vertical kill throw in the game. Why doesn't he have a kill throw anyway? Finally, tired of imitating Falcon for his down throw, now Ganondorf shoves his opponent onto the ground and stomps on them with one armored foot. Not only does it deal more damage than before and look absolutely brutal, its combo utility is completely intact. Finally, let's cover his taunts. His first two have minor differences. His up taunt has him spin only once now, and when he poses, he raises up the back of his hand and displays an icon of the Triforce of Power on it. His side taunt now accompanies the fist pound with a spark of dark lightning that actually does damage to nearby fighters. And since he uses his weapon too prominently for his old down taunt to work, now he crosses his arms and puts on a thoroughly unamused scowl, waiting for all those other weaklings to stop avoiding him and get on with it already. Feel that? The tension in the air? Ganondorf's specials have been hit or miss in past games, but now we have a chance to make them a true threat. First up is his neutral special, and boy does this need some work. Warlock Punch's unparalleled power has always been held back by its extremely slow startup and surprisingly small hitbox. But now, we can do something about that and diverge it more from the Falcon Punch. On use, Ganondorf slowly pulls his trident behind him and spins it to gather dark magic into the spear tips. Once fully prepped, he stabs forward with tremendous force, unleashing a powerful dark explosion. A couple key changes help make it more usable. First, the hitbox is bigger now and reaches further. Second, it comes in 2 versions based on whether you tap or hold the B button. The former is much faster than Falcon Punch even, but its power takes a hit, only about as strong as a smash attack. But when held, the level 2 version maintains the improved hitboxes while having nearly as much wind-up and power as the move we all know and love. The newly christened Warlock's Wrath takes the old punch and gives it a much appreciated makeover. The level 1 charge is more viable in regular play, basically a slightly slower smash attack you can turn around to surprise people, while the held version offers something devastating if the situation calls for it. We've seen other power-focused specials get this treatment lately. Sephiroth's Flare comes to mind, so this helps Ganondorf catch up. Next we have his side special, and honestly this one doesn't need an overhaul. The framework of Flame Choke is the same as before. It's an iconic move and an important part of Ganondorf's moveset as a command grab that sets up immediate tech chases. But I did add one thing to it. You can hold the B button down to charge this special too, and the second level of this one goes further and moves faster than the default. Oh, and once the charge has hit a certain point, Ganondorf gains super armor for the rest of it until he's mostly finished moving, giving him a surprise mix-up that lets him tank an attack and retaliate with a grab. This new feature opens up options Flame Choke didn't have before. It was already useful for scaring opponents who sit and shield, but now a well-timed charge can win against enemy attacks, something grabs are supposed to lose to. That said, it does have some of its old drawbacks. It's still punishable if it whiffs, and the charge version has more end lag, and it still puts him into freefall in midair, and the actual grab behaves the same regardless of the level of charge. Ganondorf's up special has always been kind of fun when it hits, but iffy as an actual recovery and rarely an optimal punish, and is another remnant of Captain Falcon's moveset. But just like with Warlock's Wrath, we can take the framework and retool it into something new. On use, Ganondorf rises upward, with some control left and right like usual. This version, however, doesn't grab anyone in the way and cut the recovery short. Instead, it starts moving sooner at the beginning, goes a little further up than before, and looses a blast of dark magic at the end that covers himself and his immediate surroundings. But just like the previous two specials, you can hold this one for a second level of strength, and charging it trades a longer startup for greater height, better lateral control, and adds two new, smaller, but still usable, explosions on the way up. While it's still not the greatest recovery, Dark Ascent stands out better next to Falcon Dive and makes Ganondorf less of a sitting duck against strong edgeguarders by using the optional charge to vary his timing and the level 2 version's extra hitboxes to stay safer. However, it's still a mainly vertical recovery on a character with poor airspeed, so getting hit out of it at the wrong time could still prove a serious problem. On to the down special. Wizard's Foot has always been a worse Falcon Kick, and now that our moveset has an improved burst option via Charged Flame Choke and a much better mid-range game, he doesn't need this as much anymore. What could even go there instead, you ask? Pulling from series lore and Ganondorf's tendency to get even tougher when he's close to defeat. Once he's at 100% damage or greater, or under 40 HP in stamina matches, he can activate his down special to tap fully into the Triforce of Power, and unknowingly demise his curse, to become a dominating presence. Marked by an aura of malice and glimpses of Ganon's silhouette surrounding him, Ganondorf's true power is unleashed. When in this state, his walk, run, and airspeed all gain a boost. A small one, but it's there. And all of his specials have new enhancements. You know how they've had 2 levels of charge? Well, in this state, the level 2 charge becomes the default when you tap the button, while holding it grants a new 3rd level of charge with truly devastating effects. Level 3 Flame Choke gains even more startup, but if Ganondorf grabs someone, he chokes them with malice instead of mere dark magic, forcing them into a crumpled state for guaranteed follow-ups with his jab, tilts, or dash attack. Level 3 Dark Ascent covers even more distance while shielding him with a Sphere of Malice the whole way that deals multiple hits to anyone who dares interfere. Level 3 Warlock's Wrath has him throw the trident at the end like a javelin, turning it into a wickedly powerful projectile that creates a malice-fueled explosion the moment it hits something, even if that something is a reflector. And if you press down and B again, Ganondorf gathers malice into one hand, plunges straight down, and slams into the ground or platform with so much force that it creates a massive shockwave. True Power is a manually activated altered state, an install in fighting game terms, that turns Ganondorf into a real final boss when his back's against the wall. But tapping into such power comes with a cost. For one, he actually gets lighter in this form, making him easier to knock out than he would be normally. This can be a real problem once the other drawback kicks in. Once 8 seconds have passed, he begins to take damage over time as if he was poisoned, and his level 3 specials inflict further recoil damage. The more time passes, the more vulnerable and desperate he becomes, and unlike some installs, he cannot turn it off. He's stuck this way until he loses his stock, or gets healed back under 100%. What sounds like a simple comeback mechanic at first is actually a metaphorical deal with the devil that can and will blow up in your face if not used carefully. All that's left is Ganondorf's final smash. And while we don't need to change it thematically or mechanically, we can give his Ganon form the same visual overhaul. Instead of pulling specifically from Ocarina of Time or Twilight Princess, this version, just like Ganondorf himself, would incorporate elements from across his entire history of boss fights. A perfect version of Ganon with which to crush your foes utterly. And there we have it, a new and more comprehensive take on Ganondorf that frees him from the shackles of semi-clonedom while keeping some of his current moveset's highlights to create the best of both worlds. He's still scary up close and prefers to force people into straight fights where he can overpower them and still weak to getting walled out. The latter was why I chose not to incorporate the crazier stuff I've seen, like using his famous reflectable magic to instantly turn games into tennis matches, but now he should be truer to character and less fundamentally flawed in any modes other than free-for-alls. How does this one measure up? Any Ganondorf mains watching, is it up to your standards? Hopefully I balanced old and new just right. And if you've been impressed or mildly amused, check out the previous episode in this series where Samus got the same treatment, or even check out my other content as a whole. A lot of different Smash-themed stuff, and occasionally content from other games as well. special thanks to these people here for helping make this video happen. Thanks in particular to my patrons for their continued support. Helps a lot knowing you guys care that much about what I do. So, until next time, has it gotten dark in here, or is it just me?